Welcome to the Infill Podcast, where we interview the most interesting members of the 3D printing and maker communities, live and with audience participation. And now, here is your host, Jonathan Levy.
Hello, everyone. Let me just make sure I got the right microphone. There we go. As you come in, make sure you let me know how the audio quality is. I'm really excited about today's episode because I discovered today's guest recently on YouTube, and my first impression with the first video was whoa, which is always an exciting first impression. His name is Taylor Sweet. He runs 3D printing services and consulting business, but as of recently also a YouTube channel. You've probably seen his videos because he has the single most organized and beautiful print farm background with a line of Prusas and a line of bamboo printers. And I'm not going to lie, I'm super jealous of how neat and tidy your workspace is. Taylor, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much.
No, you're one of the few people I know who has the Prusa XL with the tool changer. But even more than that, I think you're one of the few people I know who has the Prusa XL with the tool changer and a ton of experience with other printers, including Bamboo Lab and multi-material. So I'd love to get into that. But first, this show is all about the people and getting to know humans. And so I want to hear your story. You're a young guy running a relatively, it looks like a booming 3D printing business. Tell me your kind of origin story.
Yeah, absolutely. And booming is all relative. I keep myself busy and I have fun doing it. And I work for myself and I work from home and get to hang out with my wife and kids during the day and 3D print 365 pretty much, which is a blessing and a curse,
Yeah. You've managed to keep the printers off for this episode though, so I'm honored. The ones behind you at least.
Yeah, you know what? Every time I record, I need to shut down the whole operation, and I need to plan around the recording because the audio, as you can imagine, the audio gets pretty bad when you have 20 printers running in a small space.
Yeah, I can make some microphone recommendations that help that, but yeah, it's never going to be the same as just turning everything off. Yeah,
for sure.
So
yeah,
how
they're
did
not
this all
props.
start?
They actually do run occasionally. Yeah. So yeah, how did I get started? Great question. So back in 2017, I was in my fourth year of university. I have an engineering background. Engineering physics was my discipline, but I did a kind of a minor in mechanical engineering. And in my fourth year, we had a design project. We could basically come up with whatever we wanted to do, and then we could prototype it and using whatever means necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So my group came up with the idea of doing a Braille reader, basically like a optical character recognition, written text to tactile output, which is kind of the concept, right? So it's kind of like a noble cause in a way, like being able to transcribe something that isn't in Braille for those that are blind or hard of seeing. So basically, being able to make media more accessible. So books at a library, for instance, not everything is translated to Braille for the people that need that tactile feedback and they can't use the visual feedback.
Right.
So that was kind of the concept, and the design that we came up with. Being engineers, obviously we used CAD software, and we prototyped this thing using 3D printing.
Yeah.
So at my university, they had like a maker space, and they had some 3D printers in the lab, and we were able to send our files off to them and just request that they be printed. And that was kind of all of our involvement in the actual manufacturing of it. Was like, hey, here are our designs, do it for us. We know nothing, we trust your judgment, essentially. And now I'm on the other side of that now, and I have people sending me things, and I need to use my judgment of what layer heights to use and what materials to use and so on and so forth. But at that point, we sent it off, and we got our parts back, and the machine that they were running was like an old Stratasys, printer, behemoth machine, probably cost $500,000. And yeah, but the parts looked really good. They had some interesting characteristics to them. Now that I look back on it, and I found that prototype in a box when I was cleaning up my house recently. And I just took a closer look at it. I was like, oh, look at the extrusion width on that, and oh, there's a little bit of rigging on that print. Things that as a uneducated individual I had no clue about, right? But now I look at these things all day, so I had a better appreciation looking back on this thing than I did back then. But anyways, we got our prototype back, and it was in all sorts of tiny little pieces, and that was really the amazing thing about this prototype was it was at a very small scale. We kind of went to the standard of the International Braille Association. So it was maybe like a centimeter by half a centimeter, and within that there was 6 individual dots, because that's what makes up a letter in Braille. And we need to actuate each one of those individually. So basically like an on and off state for each individual component, and there's 6 of those per letter. And I think we were able to do 4 or 5 letters at a time on this Braille reader. So it was this very intricate, small 3D printed box. There was a servo motor that kind of actuated like a rack and pinion system. And then there was springs and like a selector mechanism. And then on the other side of it, which I wasn't involved in so much, was the software of using a Raspberry Pi camera and doing optical character recognition to actually transcribe from a book to this 3D printed prototype that was then going to spell out some letters in Braille. So anyways, cool. Yeah, so it was a pretty lofty project for
it's kind of like a Kindle, a real-time Kindle for the visually impaired.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's really cool. Wow.
Yeah, so that was kind of my first exposure to 3D printing, and getting something from the computer into your hands for the first time, and really feeling that the tangible outlet of your hard work,
right.
Not just keeping it digital, but actually physically holding it and then saying, oh, now that I see it, it's a lot smaller in person than it is on the computer, right? And
sure.
All those sorts of things. So I think the first time you hold something of your own design for the first time, and it's come from the digital space into the physical realm,
yeah,
it is. And I think that's why so many of us are so passionate about this hobby, right?
I often have that moment, Steve Jobs talks about in this famous quote about like the bicycle for the mind. Maybe people don't know this, but he talks about like, there was a graphic in an old magazine about the efficiency of animals in movement. And it was like, cheetah, dog, human walking like way down here, peregrine falcon, very, very efficient in movement. And then it was like human with a bicycle, way, way more efficient than even a falcon, right? Because you're using gears and da-da-da. And he goes, the computer's the bicycle for the mind. And I so often think about that when it comes to 3D printing. It's like maybe not the bicycle, but there's a metaphor to be had there about just being kind of the bicycle for the creativity. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Not profound, but I need to think about that idea more. But it's so true, right? Because it's just like, it's kind of like black magic. You just like snap your fingers and this thing's in front of you. It's huge.
Absolutely. So, yeah. I would say that the 3D printer is where the rubber hits the road. And that's what kind of gives you that forward motion. And, you actually, you see the return in your investment of time in the digital realm, and then you bring it over to the physical world. That's really a great metaphor. And as much as the bike enables, people to go places they couldn't otherwise go, or go further, go longer, go faster, the 3D printer really enables the average person to do things that they couldn't otherwise do. Right. And that's why it's such a revolutionary technology, and it's so empowering. It is really the democratization of manufacturing, and the fact that anybody can get into it. Because prior to that, manufacturing was quite inaccessible. But at least manufacturing with that degree of finesse, because in theory, nailing 2 boards together is a form of manufacturing, right? But 3D printing is at a whole nother level, and it doesn't require any skills in the way of some of those other methods of manufacturing, and but it obviously requires a different skill set. But it's the economic input that makes it so much more accessible, right? Sure. Like 3D printers these days are so economical.
Right. So you do this project, was it kind of love at first sight, oh my God, 3D printers? Did you immediately decide straight out of school, or was there a journey to making this? I mean, because this is your full-time thing. I think YouTube is newer for you, but you've been running. I mean, I guess we should establish what your business is, but first tell me the journey, the story.
Absolutely. Yeah. So to be honest with you, I had to think back on what my first exposure to 3D printing was. And that's when it occurred to me that it was that project in fourth year university. So prior to this conversation, I didn't really make that connection. But I think that is the origin, if I recall correctly. Perhaps there was some earlier exposure. But it wasn't a eureka moment whatsoever. It wasn't like, hey, I want to do this for the rest of my life. It was more so kind of an introduction, and it was like, hey, this is really cool.
Right.
And then, the end of the year rolled around, and it was time to graduate and time to move on with my life and decide what I wanted to do. And I had a really good time at university. I did lots of extracurriculars and things like that. And I was, fearful of the real world and getting a real job and paying taxes and growing old and dying.
Right.
So, I wanted to avoid that for as long as possible. So I started seeking out kind of master's degree programs. And with the field of engineering I was in, it was an engineering science. So it was engineering physics, which isn't as employable, right out of school. So a lot of people do go on and do master's degrees, do PhDs. Some people go the pure physics route. Other people go into a business degree. Other people just continue their engineering education, which is what I ended up doing. So I applied to a few schools just for master's degrees in mechanical engineering. And I ended up finding a professor at the University of British Columbia in Canada that operated a CAD/CAM lab. So his research group did computer-assisted design and computer-assisted manufacturing. Most of us are familiar with CAD, like Fusion 360, all those sorts of things. CAM is, on the other end of the spectrum, where you actually simulate your cut path for a multi-axis machine. So his research group was generating the software for those simulations, essentially. So even though it was a mechanical engineering research group, it was very software oriented. But yeah, so that's kind of what his bread and butter was. And then as kind of a footnote in his, on his page there, he had 3D printing, like, oh yeah, 3D printing. And I really kind of honed in on that. I was like, oh, here's a professor that's doing 3D printing research. Let's hook up with him and, see if I can learn more about something that I thought was kind of cool. So I reached out to him, put in my application for his program, and got an offer to come out and study there. And so I was like, hey, you know what? Vancouver is a beautiful city. I'm from the east of Canada, and the west coast of Canada is very picturesque, very warm climate. And it gave me an excuse to delay, getting a real job for another at least 2 years. And as a researcher in Canada, you get paid like a stipend. So you get like a very modest salary just to kind of help you live. Whereas, in other parts of the world and other degrees, like if you did an MBA, for instance, you're shelling out like $100K to get that degree. You're going further into debt.
Tell me about
in this
it.
Case, yeah. In this case, I got like a modest salary, and I was getting more qualifications, and I was delaying being an adult. So it really had all the makings of a good opportunity. So I did decide to take that and run with it. And yeah, when I got there, I realized that when I said 3D printing was a footnote on this professor's CV, it really was a footnote. Nobody in the lab was doing any sort of 3D printing research. They had one 3D printer. They had an old Stratasys machine, and I think that was the basis for putting 3D printing on his CV, just to say like, hey, we have a 3D printer. It is what it is. But meanwhile, all of the guys in the lab were like software developers, like doing, these multi-axis machine simulations. So I get there and I was like, hey, I want to do a 3D printing research project. And at that time, I didn't really know how academia worked and, doing a research-based master's degree. But as it turns out, you spend like the first half a year just figuring out what problem you want to solve. And meanwhile, some professors have like a list of problems and research projects they've identified and they've curated for years, and then they pair up a student with that particular research project, and they're like, hey, I want you to figure out the friction force on a cutting tool as it's cutting through a block of aluminum. And you're going to spend the next 2 years characterizing that, doing the physics, all of the math behind it, write up a paper and publish it. And, that's kind of the story arc of a traditional master's degree.
Sounds terrible.
So,
sorry, that sounds terrible.
Exactly. So I got there and I was like,
yeah.
So I got there and I was like, hey, 3D printing's cool. I see you have a 3D printer. What can I learn about it? What can I contribute to the knowledge of society using this machine? And he had no knowledge of it really, besides owning a 3D printer. He didn't know much about it. He didn't have a predefined research project. So I spent the next 6 months just kind of researching, reading other research papers, trying to figure out what could I contribute in terms of knowledge to the 3D printing landscape. And at that point, I didn't own my own 3D printer. I'd never even operated a 3D printer. And here I was about to dedicate 2 years of my life to studying this field of research. So I kind of dove headfirst into that and read all the papers I could on different publications. And after a little while, I started to kind of hone in on a particular area of research that I felt was underdeveloped.
Okay.
So my research project ended up being on the overhang angle limitation in fused filament fabrication.
Okay.
So in simple terms, when do you need support material for your FDM 3D prints, right?
Interesting.
So I read all these research papers, and there was all sorts of papers trying to come up with different, unique, and novel 3D printing support structures, right? Like we have crazy tree supports now, and we have different algorithms for dictating where the support is placed, and so on and so forth. And when you go back to the origin of that research, they all make the assumption that 45 degrees is this universal standard for support enforcement. And then from that point forward, they do all sorts of crazy math and science to try to reduce the amount of support material required, but all based on this preconceived notion that 45 degrees is like the ultimate angle at which support is required. So I basically decided, hey, like, why is it 45 degrees? Could it be 50? Could it be 60? Could it be 30? And what factors dictate that maximum, surface angle for support material generation?
And what did you find out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what I found out basically is it's, when you deposit a molten polymer, it's in the liquid state, right? It cools very quickly, but there's a moment in time when it's not a solid, and it's got some characteristics of a fluid.
Right.
So when you think of droplet mechanics and you think of, water has, this characteristic called surface tension, where it wants to adopt like the surface area minimizing shape. So when you think of a extrusion bead on a 3D printer, you're basically forcing it into an unnatural shape, right? Like it's kind of a rectangle. It's, you have your extrusion width, which is one dimension, and then you have your layer height.
Right.
And so for a short period of time, that's a liquid, and it's going to want to recoil into a sphere, right? It doesn't want to stay a rectangle. So there's a period of time where it's still molten, and it's not going to stay a rectangle, especially when it's not, squished up against the bed, for instance, or up against the previous layer. So you have this element of surface tension where you're going to have some contraction in the width of the bead. So what I found out is that it's like a parameter, or it's derivative of the layer height and the extrusion width, primarily.
Okay.
So with thicker layers, you can't print as steep of overhangs without support, whereas with thinner layers, you can be more ambitious in printing deeper angles. So
and I guess that's controlling for cooling, right? Because if you have massive cooling, you can obviously minimize the amount of time you're in the liquid state. But all things being equal, I had never thought about that, but it makes perfect sense. At 0.1 layer heights, you could probably go way, way more aggressive.
Exactly, and it comes down to like the offset, right? The horizontal offset, like how much you're overhanging from your previous layer, and your kind of step change in your positioning is smaller with smaller layer heights. So
that's very cool. So because I want to get to the exciting stuff, which is the business that you're running, because I think so many people are going to be fascinated in it. So you do this degree, do you graduate and say like, okay, I still don't want to be an adult, I'll be an entrepreneur, which is totally different ballgame?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of been my philosophy all along is, avoid the hard stuff as long as possible, and um,
sure.
find things you enjoy, because then they feel less difficult. And yeah, so I left my degree and moved back home, and at that point it was kind of just on the brink of the pandemic.
Hmm.
I should say, actually, and this is an important point. Like I said, there was a Stratasys machine in our lab, and I wanted to determine the maximum angle of the surface which was not requiring support. As it were, Stratasys machines do not allow you to disable support, like
Really?
regardless. So literally, because it's such a closed source ecosystem,
Wow.
um, I was trying to study like, hey, like how steep can we go like without support material, and the slicer just wouldn't let you turn support material off. It was just like because they just think that they know
Cheating.
better.
Yeah. Yes.
So I needed that. So at that point, I decided to buy a Prusa.
Uh-huh.
Um, so I name all my printers. That one's called the Professor. Um, but yeah, so the Professor has stayed with me, and he's still operating to this day. But that was my first 3D printer. So I used it for my research, and then when I moved home, I had this 3D printer. I was out of school. I didn't have a job, and I was like, what can I do with this? How can I make some money with it? And it was like right around Valentine's Day, and I needed a last minute gift for my then girlfriend, and I found this really cool like rose 3D model on Thingiverse. It was like a 2-part rose with a stem.
I know the one you're
I gave it
talking
to
about.
her. Yeah, it's a great model. Um, Gave it to her. She really liked it, and I was like, hey, like this is kind of a cool concept. Like, would people buy this? So we ended up setting up a table on Valentine's Day at the university that I went to in my hometown. Um, we set up on Valentine's Day with a table of 3D printed roses,
Yeah.
and right next door to us was a table of real roses. So you'd see people walk up and they'd like look left, they'd look right, and they'd make a life decision in that moment. Do we go with the technological solution that's going to last forever, you know,
Right.
or do we go with the modern or the age old classic of real roses, which have a nice scent and whatever, but are going to last a couple days before they
Yeah.
they wilt and die. So it was kind of interesting in that moment to see, and I think a lot of people at that time, 3D printing still had kind of an appeal to it, right? It was kind of new, it was technologically advanced. So you could see people make that decision in their mind, and we ended up selling out of our roses that day. So we did quite well. And then going forward, I just started to try to design some of my own things.
Hmm.
And then the pandemic hit, and we basically shut down all of our production of normal stuff because it felt silly making roses when people are getting sick and dying and the
Yeah.
world is in a dire state. So at that point, we'd seen online, or I'd seen online, that people were doing face shields with 3D printers, things like that. And the other thing that people were doing was these things called ear savers,
Yeah.
which basically you've probably seen them. Everybody in 3D printing probably like printed more of these than they care to admit.
Right.
Right. So just to take the mask off your ears and put it on the back of your neck instead. So it's just a little piece of plastic, but great application of 3D printing because it's
Totally.
filling a demand that is transient, right? Like it's just not, there wasn't a whole lot of time for regular manufacturing to catch up and start producing these things. So 3D printing really was a stopgap solution.
Totally.
And yeah, I think in total I ended up doing like over 10,000 of those.
Holy
Um,
crap.
yeah, so
That's
we started
wild.
doing those, and part of what we were doing is we were, and this was probably too generous with my time, which I tend to be, but I was letting people customize them, right? Like so they could
Hmm.
they could put the name of their city, and that was kind of the format was Tel Aviv strong, or
Yeah.
Toronto strong, or whatever it may be, right? Like kind of just a motivational message, but they could customize it. And then I started offering color customization. And at that point, I was familiar with a company called Mosaic Manufacturing,
Okay.
which is the maker of the palette line of products. You've probably heard of them, but it's like a multiplexer for filament that allows you to do multicolor on your 3D printer. So I had this palette, and I wanted one for a long time, but I ordered one and started doing these multicolor ear savers where the text was a different color than the base, and it just really elevated it, right? So at that point, I wanted to scale and I wanted to do more of them. So I reached out to the CEO, who was a graduate of the same university I went to. I said, like, hey, I want to order like a couple of these. Like, could you give me kind of a bulk discount if I order 4 or 5? And at that point, he's like, yeah. And I had that dialogue open. So I was like, hey, by the way, here's my resume. Like, keep me in mind. And then I was just, kept operating, kept doing, the face shield thing. And then a few months later, he reached out and was like, hey, we have an opening. Like, do you want to, talk? Do you want to, interview for a job here? So I did that, and I ended up getting a job there. So I worked for them remotely. They're based in Toronto. I wasn't in Toronto at the time. So I was working from home, as most people were during COVID, and developing their line of 3D printing materials. So basically figuring out all of the different materials that they were going to offer, where to source them, and doing a lot of characterization of print parameters and building print profiles and stuff like that. Cool. And this was all for their line of 3D printers, which they were developing at the time. And these are, enclosed machines that can print PEEK and PEC and Ultim and all these high temperature materials, in addition to PLA and ABS and all those things. So that was my job. I was kind of supply chain management and print profile building, contacting all these vendors.
I want to say, as you spoke, I mean, it sounds like your business really like got its roots during COVID, and you just gave me a flashback. Like at the beginning of COVID, I was in personal development, specifically in accelerated learning courses, like learning and memory courses. And I remember writing emails to my audience and being like, every single crisis, pandemic, depression, like every crisis that humanity has ever faced, all the like most successful businesses come out of them, right? So if you look back, like Microsoft came in after the 1989 stock market crash, and basically every business. And I remember writing to people and being like, look, you have a choice during COVID. You can let your fitness slip and make all these excuses about how, you can't finish your degree. And you could be one of those people who like this is happening to them, or you can be one of these people who this is happening for them. And that's exactly what you did with this, right? Like you didn't take advantage of the pandemic or anything, but you decided to come out to people. And very much it sounds like, I mean, obviously people died and the pandemic was horrible emotionally and in many other ways, but your family, this happened for you in a way that you provided value to other people and were able to get your business off the ground. So I want to commend you on that, because it's not easy when the world is shutting down to say, I mean, again, I don't want to make it sound like I want people to profiteer from a crisis, but it's not easy to say like, hey, this is a horrible situation. What is the opportunity to help others? And also, as you said, like not grow up, but start a career. So I want to commend you on that, because it's really cool. I also got into 3D printing as a hobby during COVID. So like, it's fun to look back and be like, yeah, that there was a lot of opportunity then and there at that moment. So anyway, carry on. So you worked for Palette, but you're still growing your business during this time, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yep. So I was working remotely for Mosaic, and at that time I was kind of doing my own thing just on the side, evenings and weekends. And because of the efforts I had, done for the community during the pandemic, it was all just, pro bono, helping people out. Like everything was free and you could just like ask for it and you'd get it. But the return to me was just like the word of mouth, and like a fledgling business really ramped up quickly in terms of like exposure within like a relatively small community. And then, at the kind of the tail end of the pandemic, Mosaic was kind of recalling all their employees, like to, hey, come back into the office. Like they're very much like a human-centric company, and like they really like that in-office work environment. So I basically had the opportunity at that point to move to Toronto and work there, or stay where I was, which, I'm in a small town and I like it. I'm not a big city kind of guy. So at that point I had a decision of like, hey, do I stay on with this company, doing my dream job? Like, I'm working for a 3D printer manufacturer, right? And I'm seeing behind the scenes of the entire industry. So it was quite rewarding, and I was using my education and all that. But I wasn't willing to move, and I had this entrepreneurial spirit, and I wanted to do something. And I had my business still kind of just, simmering in the background, right? Like, I wasn't stoking the fire, but it was just kind of like had its own momentum, and it was carrying along. And I had all this word of mouth from my pandemic efforts. So I decided, hey, I'm just going to go full time. I'm going to, leave this job and just focus on my own business.
That's amazing. The big question I want to ask you is, because I think, I think Joel said it, like, everyone who buys a 3D printer takes them a couple of days and they're like, okay, how can I make money with this? Like, I have manufacturing in my house now. So I want to ask you how you get customers, what products you sell. I do quickly have to thank today's sponsor. DJ is pro in the comments. PCBWay? I'm like, yeah, you knew I was setting up anytime I ask a really, really good question at the 30-minute mark, it means it's time to thank PCBWay. They're wonderful humans. Let me see if I can pull this up correctly without making a mess. Hey, I did it. All right, great. So PCBWay, as you guys know, first off, they sponsor this channel. They sponsor Taylor's channel as well. They're just wonderful supporters of the 3D printing community. They don't just make PCBs. It's important for me to emphasize that. As you can see here, they make every kind of manufacturing and fab, from sheet metal fabrication to CNC to they'll metal 3D print stuff for you. They'll machine titanium for you. They'll do injection molding for you. I toured their factory. It is insane the scale that they are operating on, to the point where they can offer you 5 PCBs for $10 and they give you a sign-up bonus of $5. Definitely check it out. Link in the description. I'll just also add, on an interpersonal level, they're wonderful human beings to deal with. Everyone I've ever interacted with at PCBWay has been professional, friendly, kind, dedicated to customer service. These guys are serious players, and they do a lot to support the 3D printing community. Myself and most of the other makers that you guys love are supported in part by PCBWay. So check them out for your next project. And thanks to PCBWay for making this episode possible. I think that was a pretty good ad read, right? I went for the human angle.
Nailed it.
Okay, Taylor, you've got this booming business. At some point, you go from one Prusa to, like, you said you have 20 printers. I only see the ones in the back, but I want to understand the how, right? It sounds like you're a very open guy about, how you built this. I think we all want to know, right? Like, I would love to use my printers to serve my local community and print things for people who need them. How do you make that happen without spending your entire day, on Facebook Marketplace replying to people?
That's a fantastic question. And I did start on Facebook Marketplace, and I quickly realized that it's a huge time sink.
Yes.
And I very quickly wanted to learn how I could take, this sounds kind of bad, but I wanted to take the human element out of it,
Right.
or at least put it
in the manufacturing. Yeah.
And it's just, with 3D printing, the world is your oyster, and there are so many options, but you can't approach a potential customer and say, hey, I can do anything for you. What do you want me to do? Because
Right.
you'll go blank, right? You need structure. So you need to kind of compartmentalize what anything looks like. And, you can offer options within that, but you need to guide people in the right direction towards what value you can provide them.
Yep.
Yeah. So started with one printer, started printing somebody else's designs, and quickly realized that I'd be better off doing my own designs, because I'm an engineer and I know CAD, and I just get way more fulfillment out of it, to be honest with you. Even with the face shields, there was lots of face shield designs online, but I decided to take one and try to make it better in my own way. I think in some ways that's beneficial, and in some ways that's kind of a character flaw that I always feel the need to, put my own spin on something and, whatever. But I think in most regards, I try to make things better and at least more personal to me. And I get way more fulfillment out of it. So just printing somebody else's designs is great. And if you're just getting started, that's, a fun way to do it. but the sense of fulfillment that you get out of designing something yourself,
And
for
when
me
other
now,
people use something that you made, it is so rewarding, you know?
absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, for me, like being able to design something, like I have an idea, and I'm like, okay, let's productize that. Let's package that up into something people could buy, and let's put a listing for that on the internet somewhere. And then somebody's gonna, spend their hard-earned money on it, right? And then I'm gonna ship it wherever they live. So it's like making that connection of this was an idea in my head yesterday, and somebody in Japan just ordered one. It's like,
So cool.
it's quite profound.
I'm looking at your website now, and I put it on the screen so people can see. I mean, you've got some cool stuff, and not all of it is super engineering intensive. You know, you've got like some stamp dispensers that are cool and roses that are cool. Do people buy a lot through your website, or do you advertise on Etsy? I mean, how do you get that guy from Japan to know about your Canada Post mailbox stamp dispenser?
Well, I don't think the guy from Japan is buying a Canada Post mailbox, but
Yeah, I guess that's true.
yeah. So I do some sales through my website, but yeah, Etsy is a big platform for me as well.
Yep.
I think for most people, they start there because it's safe and it's cost effective and it's easy, and they really bring the traffic. Bless you.
Thank you. Nobody heard that. I muted. But thank you. Yes, Etsy has its downsides, but if you want to sell creative works, I feel like they're the only kind of game in town.
Yeah, so let me just kind of pull back a little bit and give some tidbits that are actually useful.
Sure.
With my philosophy is, so many people want to know how you can make money 3D printing, right? What can I sell? And then when they see somebody that's successful, they're like, well, what do you sell? And there's kind of two things I'd like to kind of say in that regard. One of them is, and this is not to come across as critical or condescending, this is a make anything machine. If you can't make money making anything, then you're doing something wrong,
Totally.
right? That's one thing. And then the other thing is make good products. Don't make good 3D printed products. 3D printing is a method of manufacturing. It is not the be all end all. And in my early days, I said, I'm selling a 3D printed rose or a 3D printed this. For certain products, the term 3D printing adds value, right? And in others, it degrades. And especially as 3D printing becomes more universal and people sell their crappy looking prints online on Facebook Marketplace, if you're competing in that vertical of 3D printing, first of all, you need to educate your customer what is 3D printing, and they are either going to know already and think highly or poorly of it based on their previous experience with it, or you're going to need to educate them, right? But when you walk into a store, do you see injection molded army man on the shelf? No, you just see the army man, right? Or whatever it may be.
Yeah, you don't see it unless it's something that adds value, like hand painted, handmade.
Absolutely.
That's very interesting. That's a very smart point.
Yeah. So that would be my advice: is find a market that you can compete in, and realize that your market is limitless. Really, if you're selling 3D printed products, then yeah, you're limited to people that want to buy 3D printed products. But if you're selling products, I mean, there's billions of people in this world that need products of some sort, right? So
that is really, really, really good advice, guys. Make sure you hit the like button if that's advice to you, because I've fallen into that trap too. Like I have some artwork that I sold on Etsy for a while. I actually stopped because Israel Post is such a pain in the ass. But like I designed these statues. This one is actually a remix, but like some of the stuff I designed from scratch, and it's like very much I marketed it as 3D printed statues. So it's not as it's not art. If it's just something I 3D printed, you can see how much time I haven't moved this from the shelf. But if it's just a statue, then it's art. Oh, there's my house key. I've been hiding that in there.
That's awesome.
That's the feature. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really, really, really good advice. Huh.
Yeah, and I think if you keep those two things in mind, like a 3D printer is a make anything machine, and I can make anything and not just 3D printed products. Obviously it is 3D printed, but think about the markets that you can compete in, and better yet, if you can use the the characteristics of 3D printing to your advantage to make a better product.
Totally. Totally.
Like just as an example, like one of the big products we do is replica street signs, right? Very, very basic product. You need a large format printer to print those, mind you. So these Prusas don't cut it. But the fact that 3D printing has the third dimension, all of our signs are embossed, right? And people like embossed because our competitors have flat printed metal.
Right.
So immediately we're leveraging the technology to make a better product than our competitor. Right. So we're competing in a marketplace that's dominated by other methods of manufacturing. And we are doing it in such a way that we add value. And you don't need to add value. You can compete, on parity with whatever your competitor is providing, right? Like it can be equal. Although 3D printing, because of its flaws, is probably never going to be equal to, other methods of manufacturing in terms of, raw quality. Sure. But if you can differentiate in terms of, the third dimension, and you can leverage that, then you can create an even better product. And of course, the customization is that's the main you just can't
turnaround time. Also, there. Like I've made vinyl signs. It's a shitload of work. That's very, very smart. I love that. That's like my big takeaway for this episode. I liked that you pointed out like people always focus on what you sell too much, right? Because that's not the magic. And I've fallen into that trap of being like, oh, well, Uncle Jesse understood video games, so he designed that, this like video game controller thing. What do I understand? And what you're saying is the idea isn't the wow factor, right? But I do want to get a sense, like share with us some ideas that you've had of products that are good sellers for you. Like, and maybe,
sure.
maybe the story of like, oh, well, I was using, I think, this leaf blower thing that you sell, and I was like, I could use this to dry my car. That's a kind of cool idea.
Yeah, so I would propose that your question is misformed in the sense that it includes a preconceived notion that the ideas need to be your own.
True.
Let the customers tell you what the ideas are. Let the market dictate.
Yep.
Most of my products, for instance, the product I sold to Japan, it's a mount for a turntable, like a record player, and it sits on a 45 degree angle, and it just puts the record player on display. And it's a product that the manufacturer used to make, and they don't anymore. So I had a customer that came to me and they said like, hey, can you replicate this? Here's a photo. So it's like, okay, sure. And then I did it for him, and charged him money for it. But did I charge him enough to make it worth my time? Not necessarily, but I had that design, and I was like, hey, if this guy wants it, who else wants it? And I don't own this record player. I've never heard of this record player. But with marketplaces like Etsy, it takes me 5 minutes to take a photo of whatever product I've made, as long as it's not proprietary to that customer.
Yeah.
And it's low risk to take 5 minutes and spend the 20-cent listing fee on Etsy to say like, hey, let's put this online, and if somebody wants it, they want it. And hey, it turns out somebody in Japan wants it, and somebody in Australia wants it, and that's the product of mine that's most international. Like I ship that all over the world. And I don't do many units of it, but it doesn't matter because I do, a few units of that, a few units of this, and whatever. But yeah, let your customers dictate what they want, right?
It's really funny. Like the advice that you're sharing is advice that I have shared with other people in other niches, like with online courses. People are like, well, where'd you get the idea for your online course? And then when it comes to 3D printing, because it is an everything machine, we have a saying in Hebrew, the shoemaker goes barefoot. Like all this stuff that I knew as an entrepreneur in other verticals, straight out the window. I'm like, oh shit, this is really good advice. You're basically preaching the lean startup or it's called customer development. Eric Ries calls it. It's that, right? Take customer feedback, turn it into products. And yet I 3D printed a bunch of leather molds for someone that he wanted, which was Creative Commons, open source, commercial. Like the license for the molds that he sent me, I could have turned around and sold thousands of them. And I was just like, I wonder where I find, like, I want, tell your friends. That was basically tell your friends that I can print them for them too. Like Could have put that up on Etsy if one person wanted. I already had the G code sliced. That's a very
Exactly.
interesting idea.
And the thing is, if you tried to spin up a website for that, or you're a brand for that particular product, if you do it well and there's a market for it, then that's the best way to do it, is to be a specific provider of a specific service, because it's more trustworthy than a general store, right? Like, you don't want to be a make everything shop necessarily, because it can degrade your brand. But if you do one thing really well, then you can focus on it and build your brand around it. But with Etsy, it really doesn't matter, because
too, like leather molds where you can mold your own wallets and your own with your brand name right on there. I'll put your logo onto the molds for you, man.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to get at is that's just one idea, and if you took that and ran with it, there'd be a lot of time required to build a brand around it and build a business around it. And you're going to be more trustworthy in the end if you do it well, and that's what you focus on, versus I also sell dragons on my website. Like, that just degrades your brand. So you need to focus if that's your what you're
create
pursuing.
Separate brands.
Or create separate brands. But again, there's a lot of work involved in that. And if you look at my website, it's very much a general store, catch-all. Like, we do everything. But on Etsy, for instance, it doesn't matter, because people aren't coming to my store. They're going to Etsy and they're browsing for whatever it is they're looking for. Half the time, they don't even pay attention to who they're buying it from. So the brand loyalty goes out the window there, and you can get away with having one of everything, and nobody's going to knock you for that.
Because Etsy does have stores, and they had me set up a store with a name, but I never thought I mean, you probably look at your analytics and traffic. Like, I guess people don't really want to know. But also, it's like, I feel like there's some forgiveness. So I have this friend who's like the tape king, was the tape king of Amazon. He sold his business, but he has like an empire of tapes. We're talking like 6 figures worth of tape every month. Okay. And his big thing was like, I'm going to sell this business, and then we're going to branch out into like craft adhesives, like glue and glue sticks too. And I was like, I kind of made fun of him, but it's true, right? Like, if you have credibility in craft tape and decorative tapes, it's a lateral move to go into adhesives. And the same is true here. Like, you have these attachments that I showed on screen, but for people listening on the audio, attachments to a leaf blower that help you dry your car more effectively, as I understand it. It wouldn't be out of nowhere if you start 3D printing attachments for drills or hangers for tools. It's a lateral move from leaf blower tools to saw dust collection to screwdriver mounts for your workshop. It's kind of like, you can't go from selling boutique coffee to massage services, but you can definitely go from this kind of tool to another kind of tool and slowly expand out your credibility until, we make face shields. Face shields are also kind of a tool, in a different profession. So that's an interesting thing as well.
I would challenge that. I think you're slightly misinterpreting what I'm saying.
I wasn't saying you're saying that. I'm saying, I think even if people do look at your Etsy store, that I don't think it takes away credibility. But what you're saying, I think, is people don't even look at the Etsy store.
Absolutely. So yeah, exactly. Everything you said is true if you're trying to build a brand.
Right.
Because you don't want to confuse your customer by offering products in a totally different niche, right? Like, that's confusing, unless you're a general store. But general stores don't do well. You need to be a brand, right? If you're building your own brand, if you are on Etsy in particular, or those marketplaces, people don't there's no credibility. Like, Etsy has the credibility. The only credibility you have is like your star rating, and it's like, oh, you fulfill your products on time and whatever. It's like, nobody cares that you sell cookie cutters and you sell leaf blower nozzles, and they have nothing to do with each other, right? Like,
that's interesting. I didn't realize that. I completely thought that because Etsy wanted me to make a store, that they were then going to push my store to try and get repeat sales. But that's eye-opening.
Yeah.
We do have a question, by the way, from Emergent 3D, who wants to know, this was also my problem because Israel Post is caught in the 90s. Immersion 3D wants to know, how do you ship to Japan and other countries outside yours? Is it hard where you are?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Shipping is an interesting problem, and it's very location dependent, as you've tested to. Um, in North America, I'm Canadian, I'm in Canada, but it's probably a 50-50 split between US and Canada in terms of my sales, and then there's reserve maybe 10% of that for international, but it's really dependent. So a lot of my products, and this is when design design intent is really important. In Canada, I can stick a stamp on something as long as it's below a certain size.
Yeah.
So I design my products so that they fit in a particular package, because then I can offer very inexpensive shipping. And you only have the means to do that if you're designing the product yourself. If you're reselling something, it's like, well, it's this dimension, and if it doesn't fit in an envelope, then sorry, you have to pay $20 to get it from point A to point B. Right. And in Canada, that's the state of affairs. Like, for me to send something, interprovincial, which we have provinces in Canada, but sending it like domestically, like regionally, whatever. It could be $20. Meanwhile, I can send things to Texas, which is like southern United States, for like $8. So yeah, and then internationally, like, you can get reasonable rates for packages, but sometimes you pass that on to the customer and they like have a calculated shipping rate based on their location. Sometimes you roll it into the product, or you split it 50-50. All those sorts of things. But yeah, keeping in mind how you're shipping something, the box it's going in, and how much it's going to cost you to get it.
Is Canada Post pretty good about, like, you can order the label online, they'll send you supplies? I used to run a shipping business in California, and it was so much easier than here. Like, they'll pick up every day. You can order a truck to come every single day. They'll send you free supplies. Israel Post, get bent.
Yeah. So they're kind of middle of the road. Like, they're okay, but they're not great. The biggest thing is tracking, like whether or not the customer can track the package. And when you're talking about sticking a stamp on something, they can't. So it's a risk you have to take to, and it depends on how much of a customer focused business you want to be, and how happy you want to keep people. So I kind of put a disclaimer that says, like, hey, this is untracked, at your own risk, whatever. And it is what it is. But if somebody takes issue with that, I usually just replace the product. Right. But it's the cost of doing business, and it's unfortunate. But you have to establish trust, and you just have to trust that there's good people and trust that there's bad people. And you just have to, if you want to, be competitive in the market, you basically need to offer free shipping, because people are so used to Amazon, right? Like the Amazon effect, where
that's their third really, really great point of this interview. Big takeaway. Carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, so you have to be able to compete with inexpensive shipping, because the biggest mistake sellers make on Etsy, if you look at their product page and you look at how much the shipping is, oftentimes it's more or the same amount, or and psychologically you don't want to pay more for the shipping than the product, right? So that makes it very difficult to sell anything under $20 on Etsy if your cost of shipping is $20, right? So that's why I try to design my products so they fit in an envelope, and I can send them for the cost of a stamp, which is $2, $3, depends on the weight. But that's highly determinant of my success in my sales, is the ability to have inexpensive shipping, and that's true of anyone. So you really just need to factor that in. And
that is very, very smart. Yeah. So would you say it's better to just increase the price, and therefore the perceived, because we know people perceive price as an indicator of quality. So is it better to just up your prices and then make free shipping?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which, by the way, many people don't realize this is what Amazon is doing. Like, you're paying for that shipping even if you have Prime. That $15 water bottle is actually $10 if you go to Target. And that's a real example that I experienced. You're paying for the shipping. It's just factored in for psychological reasons in most cases. So I'm going to do that. I might just, if I can find a branch of the Israel Post that's actually open for more than an hour a day, I might just relist my stuff on Etsy. Taylor, I want to ask you about printers because first off, you have the Prusa XL, which you're one of the very few people who has it. I don't actually know of any other content creators who have a tool changer version. You're the first one, I think. And you have a lot of Bamboo printers. And obviously, as I see behind you, you're very invested in the Prusa ecosystem. You're running these printers nonstop. So I'm curious where you are, what you're investing in. You just put out a video that people should check out, updating on the Prusa XL quality. But I imagine you're also a little sore about waiting 2 years and paying $3,500, and the profiles are not perfectly tuned and ready for you. So I want to hear, I want to try and keep emotion out of this because this is a business decision for you. And also I need to stay out of drama for good. But if your business scales tomorrow, what printers are you going to be investing in and why, based on all your experience?
Great question. And there was multiple points I'd like to address in what you just said. So being a content creator, it's a whole different psychology. Like it's a whole different school of thought. I'm amongst the first people to report on the Prusa XL and certainly the 5-head. And that's kind of been a strategy, as I'm sure you can attest to, especially as a starting out creator, like in small audience, like you need to jump on those trending topics.
Yes.
So for me, I got in on day one on the Prusa XL order. I think that must have been before I was doing content because I've been doing that for less than a year. But I definitely make a lot of purchase decisions based on the content that I could create from it. And I just double end any purchase I make because it's going to make me money. I'm going to use it as a tool and I'm going to make content with it. And and the content part is fun. Like that's my hobby.
You're not going to make the money back for almost any printer. I mean, unless it's a $199 Ender and you really, really love it enough to, in good conscience, recommend it. You're never, I mean, that's why I canceled my Mark IV order, not because I think the Mark IV is a horrible printer, but other people already did the reviews before I got it. I was like,
absolutely,
I can't spend $1,200. I'm not going to make that much on the video. Not even close. So,
absolutely. Yeah. The economics of it are important to consider. And
right.
Being the first mover, like you have the first mover advantage always.
Right.
So even with the A1, for instance,
I will say what's nice about the XL though is a lot of these printers are just, you talk about the Anycubic Cobra Pro 2, you give the features, no one's going to be interested in 3 weeks. I love Anycubic. I love you guys. The printer still needs some work on the profile tuning, but like nothing against you guys, but no one's going to care about that printer in 2 weeks. Whereas the Prusa XL, you can make a lot of content around that and you can do a lot of shorts and you can do a lot of amazing prints and tool changes. And because it's open source, you can tinker with it and improve it and contribute to the community, which is going to build your following. So that I think is a better decision than buying. There's no printer that expensive, so I don't have a comparison.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, is the story arc, right? Like a lot of videos on YouTube are one-offs, and you do a product review and then you move on. And I do my share of those, but where I really kind of cut my teeth, so to speak, is with this like niche printer called the Trudon, which is like a Voron derivative, basically a pre-built Voron 2.4. And I've done, I think, 10 videos on that printer.
Wow.
I like don't want to kind of toot my own horn, but I feel like it's probably unheard of to have such a story arc of like starting from an unboxing to like initial thoughts to like here's this upgrade, here's that upgrade, and it's like, and I like my online following is primarily based on that. That was where I got my start, and a lot of my supporters over on Patreon have an interest in that printer, and for whatever reason. Well, actually, I know the reason, but nobody's talking about that particular printer besides me.
What is the reason? I haven't really heard much about it, but what is the reason?
Exactly. So the reason is that Formbot, they make Voron kits. That's where most people know them.
Right.
They don't value influencer marketing. So I had to buy that printer. I invested in it, and even today, like they've sent me a few things, but you basically have to ask them for it. They don't seek out influencers. And
isn't that so funny how that's like one hire at each one of the companies I visited in China? And I don't want to toot our own horns, but it really is true. Like when I saw Caribou went out of business or is going out of business in the process, and they used to make like modified Prusa Mark III. I won't call them clones, but they basically literally the tweet read, "We're going out of business because of." They said it in a kind of politically careful way, but we're going out of business because of overhyped printers that influencers talk about all the time, and nobody has bought our printers since. And they didn't like blame the influencers, but it just made me realize like, whoa, this community, the purchasing decisions, and I know this from when I had a Bamboo Lab affiliate account. I no longer do due to my own stupidity, but like this community purchases based on the content that's created around this stuff. Like there's no number two, I don't think, sales channel. Like I don't think maybe Bamboo Lab is running Instagram Reels ads or Facebook ads, but I don't think so. So that's interesting.
Absolutely.
And yeah, you're right. Formbot has never reached out. I don't know anyone who's ever worked with them. So that's interesting.
Yeah. So the reason Voron kits will sell themselves because the Voron project has its own momentum, and people are posting about making Vorons or building a Voron, right? And it's like, oh, where do I buy a kit? Because I'm too lazy to source this myself. And it's, you have a handful of suppliers, but so those kind of sell themselves. But Formbot has their own line of printers, and the Trudon is one of them. And the appeal of that is that it's a pre-built Voron essentially. And they don't send it to any influencers, so that's why nobody's talking about it. I bought it, I did an unboxing, and it's like, I played off the hype of the Voron, obviously. I called it a Voron clone. It's really a derivative because they changed up a few things. But for all intents and purposes, it's a Voron 2.4 with a hell of a lot less work to build it. So I built it up, and then, like I said, I've done like 10 or 12 videos on it. I switched it to Clipper.
It doesn't run Clipper out of the box?
No, it runs RepRap firmware, which is an interesting decision. But RepRap in its own way is very capable. So that's part of my story arc has been I have two of them, and one of them runs RepRap, one of them runs Clipper, and anytime I do an upgrade, I have to document both. So it's my videos are twice as long and twice as much work because I'm like, here's how you do it in Clipper, and here's how you do it in RepRap, and even like it's not just software, it's like the hardware. So my next set of videos is I'm doing a CAN bus upgrade, and there's a different tool board for RepRap than there is for Clipper, and all those sorts of things.
Kind of blown away that you have the time to actually like devote to one printer. Maybe because you give them names, you actually care about them. But like we just had a new part-time employee start, Vlad, who some of you know because he's been on live streams. And like his first day, this is kind of story time, but his first day I was like, hey, can you get that, I won't say which printer broke down on me, but because it's a upcoming thing, but I'm like, hey, can you get that thing operating again so we can record with it? And he's like, I mean, he has two printers at home that he loves. One is a Voron that he built. And so he's like meticulously like making sure every bolt is tight. And at some point I had to like grab him by the shoulders and I was like, Vlad, I care about this printer zero. Like to me, it is just a burden that I need to like get it fixed and up and running so that we can move on to the next. Like printers here are disposable to me. What matters is your time, my time, audience's interest and entertainment and education. Like the printers have no value whatsoever, except for the Voron 2.4. You fucked that up, I'm gonna kill you. But that and the Bamboo printers, but everything else is disposable. And he was like, oh, I get it. Like, yeah, there's 20. So I'm amazed that you like have time to upgrade your printers. For me, it's like, if there isn't a very exciting product that someone has sent me that I think the audience will care about, like I'm not upgrading my own printers. Except for the Voron, because I love it. It's my baby.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, well, you know what? It's very determinant of the fact that I am making content because I'm very much a if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of guy, and I get excited. I like shopping. I buy lots of upgrades, and then they sit in boxes and they collect dust, and I do nothing with them. But because I'm making content now, I have an excuse to do all of these things, right? So it's great motivation to get in there and learn a few things, upgrade, and my hardware is better at the end of the day for it. And then I, have an audience that I've built around that particular
Right.
printer.
That specific printer. That's very smart. DJ is Pro asks, really disposable 3D printers. And I just want to explain, like, this is not a brag. This is more of a complaint, even though I know it falls on deaf ears. But like, when you first start out, it's really exciting and they send you free printers and it's amazing. And like, I still love my Voron because it was my first free printer and it's probably my favorite printer. Maybe. But like when I say disposable, it's like, it's a lot of Ender clones that you get. It's a lot of, there are printers that you have to talk about because they pay the bills. And it's like, there was 1 week where I got 7 printers in a week. It's like, so I really don't want to sound not grateful because I love getting products to review. I love that I get to do this for a living. Like, I'm super grateful of all of those things. But like, when there's that quantity of new printers coming out on the market, the ones that you actually care to keep and use and maintain and take care of and upgrade to the latest firmware become like few and far between. There's probably, let's put it this way. If God forbid there was a fire in my shop, I know exactly which 3 printers I'm saving, right? There's 1 resin printer and 2 FDMs if I can carry them out in time. And everything else, it's like, I don't know if you feel that way. You use them as tools in your business. So
Yeah, so that's a really good point, and that's something that I found quite surprising. I don't have that many subscribers on YouTube. Like, I have less than 5,000.
Yet. Up and coming.
Yeah,
I like your channel a lot. I think you do really, really great videos.
I appreciate that. But yeah, I was shocked at just how early companies reached out to me. And one of my early videos, like after I moved on, from the Trudon series, where I took a break from it, was for a printer, and I wanted to put a different spin on it. And you've talked about how every influencer under the sun gets these new printers, and then like it's it gets tired and nobody wants to hear about it. So you try to put a different spin on it. So that the whole premise of that video was, initially it was titled I accidentally became a 3D printing influencer, which for some people they it sounded kind of pompous, I guess, and they didn't relate to it. But other people are like, oh, I was trying to be relatable and say like, hi, I'm just a guy, like I am you like 30 minutes ago and or 30 minutes in the future, and I have companies sending me printers, and it's like, wow, like it just blew me away how quickly I was able to kind of
it happened so fast. Yeah.
Companies reached out and they wanted to send me stuff. But yeah, now I'm at the point where I have so many ideas on the back burner because things just keep coming. Companies reach out, they want to send you something. Other things I buy with my own money, but I still want to make content on it.
Right.
And yeah, the Prusa XL is the newest one, and we should probably loop back to that because there might be people waiting on knowledge. But
I also want to make a correction. I used the word disposable. What I meant was a consumable, as in like, you change the disposable cups in the water fountain because people, I use a printer for the reason. I don't mean disposable in the sense of the kind of environmental case. Like I give printers away. I sometimes sell the printers at a huge discount. But no, I'm not disposing of them. They're consumables. Someone's like, feel free to send some of those disposable printers my way. Yeah, talk to me about the Prusa XL.
Yeah, so...
you didn't answer the question. If you have to scale up your business, what are you buying? More Mark IIIs, or are you buying more Bamboo Lab printers? Like, if all of a sudden your order volume increases 20%, what are you going to do?
That's a good question. So... So obviously, like I'm very middle of the road in a lot of things, and I don't pick sides, and it's remarkable how polarizing 3D printing can be. But
Totally.
it looks like I'm a big Prusa fanboy because these are all Prusas, but behind me they're all Bamboos like on the ground. So yeah, it's pretty much an even split between those, and then I have a variety of large format printers. But I just buy whatever.
Those, by the way, are they like off camera? Where behind the camera?
Yeah, so a variety of them are off camera, and then I have a second facility that has more printers, basically.
Amazing.
But yeah, so I like both Prusa and Bamboo. I think for the money, Bamboo is definitely the way to go.
Okay.
But
in your experience, because the big complaint people have, or concern, I should say, is like, especially with the carbon rods, closed ecosystem, like. You've probably put more hours than most people on these machines. I mean, you and I both have Mark IIIs and Bamboos. I definitely do find myself having to do maintenance more on the Bamboos. They're more finicky. Like they really want you to clean the rods all the time, and things that the Prusa just will survive neglect much better. And
Absolutely.
also like little things going wrong, like nozzle temperature malfunctions, definitely much more on the Bamboos than the Mark III, at least. I don't have a Mark IV.
Yeah, so yeah, I've definitely had like weird nozzle clogs, and like I've replaced a variety of components on my Bamboo printers as well. So as much as they sell themselves as kind of a turnkey system that your grandmother could use,
Right.
they're definitely not. And like no 3D printer these days is that hands off, unfortunately. Um,
The
things
A1
just
Mini
go.
might be. It might be. I don't know. I really want to get the mom that I had testing the Anchor Make M5 back. And just like I even thought about giving it to my mom, like my mom, my actual mom.
Yeah,
Anyway, sorry, I keep
yeah,
interrupting you.
it's all good. Yeah, so I think the A1 is yeah, very interesting, and it's definitely has all of the right components to make it accessible. And then you tie in like their Maker World integration, and
Yes.
I did a video on that. It didn't get a whole lot of views, but I was basically talking about how it would like impact the 3D printing industry.
Right.
And I kind of went down the road of I could see companies licensing their designs for like a per print thing. Like for instance, people reached out to me. I was like, hey, can you send me the STL for this leaf blower nozzle, or would you sell that to me? And I'm like, no, because I don't trust you, and I don't want you to go
Oh
become
yeah.
my biggest competitor. But if I could say like, I will license you one print, and you can print it, but you can't do anything
Yes.
else with the raw files. I think
There is
that is
someone
where.
doing something similar where they're basically selling a computer box that
Mhm.
it's hard to explain, but you plug it into your printers and then you just get on-demand print jobs. Um, Another thing that I think might help you in your case is you just tell them, no, that doesn't work. I was gonna say you ask them what printer and what filament, and you just give them pre-sliced G code, so they couldn't at least upload the STL, but then they could upload the G code, and people could mess with it, or they could just print 100 of them with the same G code. So yeah,
Exactly. So
yeah,
yeah, and then like there's my application for that, and then the one example I gave in the video was like IKEA. Like IKEA makes 3D printed products. They have like their own line, and they're already selling them.
they have
Um,
3D printed products.
yeah, it's like this really niche product line, and they're like decorative stuff. But yeah, they do all their own fulfillment for that. But the benefit of 3D printing is that it's global and it's distributed. And if they could, you could purchase a license to print one of those for your own home.
Right.
You could save on shipping costs. It'd be more economical. It'd be, better for the environment. And like that's where the power of 3D printing really lies. But you can't establish the trust of distributing those files. So the only way to do that is to enable per prints licensing. And right now, Bamboo is on the verge of that, and they're potentially going down that road. Unfortunately, that locks you into the Bamboo ecosystem.
Right.
So I would like to see other manufacturers doing that, or a central repository where, you can upload G code for Prusa printers, you can upload G code for Bamboo printers, and you can buy a license to print one of them.
I love that. Yeah.
Not buy a universal license that you'll own forever and you can do whatever with, because you just can't trust people, unfortunately. So. Anyways, yeah,
Another
if
way,
I were to
yeah,
buy more.
another way Bamboo could do it with their cloud is I mean, you don't even need Maker World. If you can allow me to remote, like my, I just got a Tesla, and the only reason I share that is because it has valet mode, and it basically means if you fly out of town and you realize it's hailing, you can call your neighbor and be like, hey, I'm opening valet mode, and it's gonna allow them to move the car only for 2 minutes. Um, and if I could open a remote mode on my, here's an idea for Dr. Tao. If I could open a remote mode on my Bamboo printer, I call you or text you, Taylor, and I say, hey, I want this model. Here's my QR code. I'm going to
Mhm.
load in PLA. Can you print it remotely on my printer? So you control the printing. They would just need to engineer into the firmware that it doesn't get saved to the print cache, because these printers save the print cache and it needs to be grayed out in the history. But that's a really cool idea where, and it's, I mean, obviously they want to leverage Maker World. They've invested a ton of resources into it, but this could go through Maker World, and it's just allow me to remotely control your printer. But I think you're right. It's probably a whole lot easier just to add a DRM functionality into MakerWorld, like pay per number of times I print.
Yeah. But as soon as you go down this road, like people are going to get their backs up and they're going to say like, oh, that's going to be a monopoly and so on and so forth. And
so Prusa should do it too. I mean, a good idea is a good idea. And like
Yep.
they are, even though there's drama around it, they're doing what I think is a healthy idea or a healthy volley of innovation from Thingiverse to Thangs to, I mean, they're all taking inspiration from one another. I don't know if Joe would agree with me, but I think for the consumer it's healthy, and I don't think any one of them has done anything unethical in creating their own platforms that are inspired from one another. So that's a good idea that should go into all of these platforms. And then we're not locked in. Buy a license to print my file on any one of these. I don't care, you know.
Yeah. The only way that kind of breaks down is when it's proprietary concepts that people are patenting, and obviously more and more companies in the 3D printing space are doing that, protecting their IP, and then others can't.
What we're talking about is DRM. I'm not a
Yeah.
lawyer, but like
this concept
that exists, right? That exists in that if I rent a movie on Apple TV, I can only watch it once.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's kind of
music,
what I was.
But it exists with movies and television.
Yeah, and that's a great analogy actually, and that's kind of what I was proposing is, back in the day you'd buy a full album, right, of music.
Right.
Now you can buy it per song, 99 cents, and
Right.
even better than that, you don't need to buy it. You can stream it
on Spotify.
Right? Yeah,
right.
basically rent it. So that's kind of the concept is, right now you can buy a 3D model and own it forever, but there's no rental option. There's no limited use option.
Well, and worse than that, if you buy it, no one is going. Markforged is doing this. Nick says it's called digital source. That's very smart. It's very, very smart.
Yeah, I think the issue there is, and where people are going to get sensitive about this topic is protecting the rights of the maker. And a company like Markforged, like that, most of us don't own Markforged printers because they're too expensive. And even with Bamboo printers, which are more economical, like a lot of people are sensitive about the cloud and like sharing their data and things like that. Yes. For me, I don't care. I'm not sensitive to it, and I don't until I have evidence of it, and I think there's a real risk. Then I'm not going to concern myself with it. So I think unless you're a government agency, you're overblowing it. And the number of people that aren't buying Bamboo printers because it's only cloud enabled, I'm like, man, you're missing out because these are great printers.
Agreed.
But of course,
there is
the
a
open
land
source
mode though, so they're completely.
Yeah.
I suspect someone made a comment on one of my videos, and they're like, "Oh, the A1 Mini is a bed slinger. Now, what are people gonna find? Like, what are the what are the Bamboo fanboys gonna find to hate on, like other printers, right?" And I thought about that, and it goes both ways. Like, I feel like there is a faction of people who just want to hate Bamboo for whatever reason. Could be because they're Chinese, could be because people are bitter because they bought a Mark III the week before the Bamboo came out. Like, I think there is a faction of people who just don't want to like this new company, new entrant to the space. And I feel like a lot of the cloud security stuff comes from blown out of proportion for that. Now, if you are using these printers to prototype a product, you don't even have to be a government agent, right? If you are using these products to prototype something at Siemens or Bosch or BYD or Tesla, like, I get it. I totally get it. Corporate espionage is 100% a real thing that happens every single day. And I've been blown away just even when I was in China, like the things that people told me about what I had maybe or maybe not seen. Like, it's crazy. But if you're just a dude printing, honeycomb walls and little toys for your kids at home, like, or dudette, get over it, man. People have an inflated sense of their own privacy needs. In this, I will say people have a way too low sense of their privacy needs when it comes to their online banking and general online activity. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure I'm going to upset some people with that comment, but yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So just to circle back to your question, if I were to buy more printers tomorrow, I have an A1 on the way.
Cool.
I'm excited to see it. My only reservation is the footprint being, twice as big essentially with the AMS. But for the type of products I make, we do a lot of multicolor stuff, and the AMS was revolutionary.
Yeah.
We used the palette before that, and the palette is it served its time in the market, but the AMS is just so much more efficient. And what I'll say, just looping back to the XL, and let's talk a little bit more about that because people might be interested. The direct comparisons between the XL tool changer and the X1 Carbon P1P AMS, there's things I like on both fronts. I really like how with the AMS, when the printer's idle, I go over and take the spool out and put it on a different printer if I need it. With the XL, I would need to fire up the printer. I would need to preheat the nozzle. I would need to unload it. Yeah. It's going to take me 5 minutes per tool to switch filament.
I'll tell you honestly, with a lot of my printers, I just pull the Bowden tube and snip, and I'm like, I'll deal with that later. Like when I need that printer to heat it up, I'll just do it then.
Yeah, and that makes sense. But if you did want to switch the filament on the XL, you can rob the filament roll and take it elsewhere. But for instance, if I want to actually print with 5 new colors on the XL, I need to individually heat each tool head and unload it and then reload new filament. So in terms of the efficiency of that, it is not ideal. If you use the same 5 colors or 5 materials all the time, then you're never going to worry about that, or seldom you're going to worry about that. But the speed of the tool changing for multi-material, I touched on that towards the end of my last video.
Yeah.
Talking about the print quality, and we can touch on that in a minute. But yeah, the speed of the color changes. So dual color benchy, it was an hour and a half, which it was very standard Mark III days benchy speeds. It's not fast because they don't have the input shaping yet. But the tool changes, it's basically negligible difference for a single color benchy versus a dual color benchy.
Yeah.
And then a single color benchy on the Bamboo was 16 minutes, crazy quick. As soon as it's dual color, it was over 6 hours.
How fast are the tool changes on the XL in seconds?
10 seconds. Yeah.
So that's slow. That's slow compared to where they will go with it. I think I can give them credit. I know Prusa as a company is not interested in speed. They're interested in quality and durability and reliability. I will say that. Mm-hmm. But one dude in India working on himself has this project called the WP Daksh, and it's based on a Voron Trident or 2.4, I think 2.4. He has tool changes down to 1.5 seconds with perfect accuracy. 1.5 seconds. So imagine how fast that multicolor benchy is. It literally becomes negligible.
Yeah, it's all relative though, right? For me, 10 seconds is phenomenal because on the Bamboo it's 1:45. I think I clocked.
Right.
And on the Prusa,
on the distance, mine's longer because I've extended the distance. And at the shop, I have Bamboo, then other printers, then all the AMSs up top. So it's 3 minutes. That extra, 10 seconds here, 10 seconds there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's one benefit of the A1 is that the cutting happens closer to the tool head or something like that.
The filament never comes back more than this much. I'm very curious because on the A1 you have to be very specific about which Bowden tubes go into which. One of the things I want to test, but I feel like no one wants to see A1 content from me, and I don't blame them, is I want to test if I can put longer Bowden tubes because, as you said, the footprint is a nightmare. I'd really love to mount the AMS on a bookshelf and put the printer down on the desk. So I might play with that. Anyway, carry on.
Yeah. So like I said, I have an A1 on the way, and as you touched on and we touched on earlier, the content space, if you don't get one of these printers sent to you from the beginning, it's hard to kind of make an impact as a small creator. It's almost like a waste of money to get into that. That's why if you can get a niche machine that nobody's talking about, you have an opportunity.
Sure.
So I have
they really did with the Cyborg Voron. Wow, that video blew up. That video I told Cyborg, I was like, you guys need to put Alan Mandick's picture on the wall because that put you guys on the map. But it's true, and those videos did well for him.
Yeah. So for me with the A1, like I'm going to test it in my business, see how well it can do in that regard. And then in terms of content, like there's so much content, so I might just skip over it. But if I do make content, the one idea I'm thinking is kind of the title would be like, can the A1 Mini pay for itself in 1 week? And I would basically try to use it to pay for itself in 1 week. And I think it's super feasible because the printer itself is like $269 or something like that.
Yeah.
You'd have to factor in the AMS cost if I'm doing multicolor, but I think it would be so easy. Well, maybe not so easy. I shouldn't say that too soon, but I think it's very feasible for a business. Even if you're doing cookie cutters and 3D printing, that's like the most overdone thing. But if you look at Etsy shops that sell cookie cutters, like 50,000 sales, like just nuts. Like it's the biggest market,
Wow.
or one of the big markets for 3D printer products. Yeah. And that's so easy,
What are you doing with the XL, by the way? You said most of your products fit in a envelope. So did you buy the XL just for the tool changing, or did you actually want the big bed size?
Yeah, so both. So we do multicolor. Like I said, we do replica street signs. So those are always dual color, and those are like 15 inches. So that's why, we need big printers, unfortunately. And but the XL is not economical for that. So again, designed for 3D printing. And what we do is we design most of our products for manual color changes. And even if you're using a multi-material system, if you can have a fixed layer transition versus like switching back and forth twice per layer, for instance, it's just way more efficient. So we do a lot of like layered designs, just trying to keep the cost down, keep the time low for printing, and less waste. So the XL being so expensive, it's as a business decision, it's going to take longer to pay off than any other machine, obviously. But it's way easier to justify purchases when you're making money with it, first of all, and then you're making content with it.
Right.
So I live in this fantasy land where I get to just buy toys when I want to, because usually they're going to pay themselves back, not always. And I'm going to make content with it, and then I can kind of double dip in that regard.
I wonder if you'll get to a point, right, where I'm in a kind of opposite situation where I'm like, I don't think I can buy these printers because I have so many printers being sent free. I can't justify buying another one. I think you'll very quickly find yourself, you're like, I don't think I can buy printers anymore, because it's like someone else is going to send you, a Comgrow T500. You're going to have a large printer. I don't know.
Speaking of which, I reached out to them and they didn't respond to my email.
I can connect you if you
but,
want.
Cool. I like big printers, and that looks nice. But interesting on that point, Prusa is like the one manufacturer that never sends anybody anything because they don't need to, right? Like they have the market. But as you've probably seen, they've been sending people Mark IVs. So what does that say about the market share for the Mark IV right now, that they're sending it to people for what I believe is the first time? I don't know that for a fact, but they don't throw printers at people like some of these other brands do. So
but I know of the fact that have been given away, at least. Three. I know of three.
Yeah. I know Nathan Builds Robots just did a review on one. I think he spoke to Prusa directly, but meanwhile,
actually,
you have these
I know
other
of
companies.
4, and I'll tell you privately who the 4th is. And this person told me, he's like, dude, if you just reach out to them, they'll send you one, but they're not going to go looking for you. I was like, I feel like I'm not going to get one.
Yeah. But yeah, with the XL, that's the interesting thing is I paid my own money for this, and I said in the beginning of my last video, it's the most I've ever spent on a consumer product besides a car, that I can recall. I mean, like, think about it. Like, in my currency, Canadian dollars, it's like 5,000 Canadian dollars. Like, so 3,500 US, whatever, for the 5-head tool changer.
Yeah.
I was like, what have I spent that kind of money on? Like, no, shipping was extra, plus import. It's like, what have I bought?
My MacBook Pro was more expensive than that, but otherwise, you're right. Like, I think I spent $3,800 on a MacBook Pro.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, computers are expensive.
But you're right. That's
if you get a really maxed out. Yeah, and you can get a computer for a lot less, right? But but any appliance in my house, fridge, dishwasher, like anything, like yeah, under $5,000. Um, uh, yeah. So the only other thing I can think of is a car. So when you think of in that kind of territory, like there's not many people, hobbyists, that can afford or justify to buy it. Even if they can afford it, it's like, the wife's going to come knocking and be like, why'd you spend that much money on that? Like,
Right.
so unless you're making money with it or making content with it, it's like, or you really like 3D printing and have disposable income, it's a hard sell. So
Sure.
for me, being somebody that, yeah, for me being somebody that had an excuse to buy it, I mean, I have an opportunity, but I have a responsibility. Like, I want to share my honest feedback, but I don't want to tell people it's great if it's not, and I don't want to tell people it sucks if it doesn't.
Right.
And user error is rampant. And it's funny, I shared one of my early, prints off the Prusa XL and it looked terrible. And one of the comments was, looks like incompetence to me.
Get ready. Those comments only get nicer as your channel grows. Let me tell you.
It was just humorous. It's like, I spend an unhealthy amount of time thinking about 3D printing, doing 3D printing. This is how I make my living. It's like every day, eat, sleep, breathe 3D printing.
Yep. But the guy in the comments knows better, of course. Just wait, my friend. Wait.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. And to be honest with you, like getting into content, like I was a little bit apprehensive for a few reasons. Obviously, there's, you open yourself up online, you open yourself up to criticism. But as a business owner, it was like, well, do I want to show people what I'm doing? And I don't share a lot about the business side of things yet. I would like to get into that more. But because I co-branded my channel the same as my business, if you want to figure out what I print, go ahead. You can look me up. But I'll tell you that some of those sell really well, and some of them are goose eggs. So take your pick.
Very cool.
But yeah. Anyway, so with the Prusa XL on that first print, looking so bad, I shared some feedback on that, and I wanted to follow up on that with some actual semi-scientific testing and say like, what is it? Like, did I do something wrong? Because everybody makes mistakes, right?
Except the guy.
I
never makes a mistake. Yeah.
Oh yeah, he never makes.
Not once. It's never happened.
No, but yeah. So what I did is I basically just grabbed 5 filament rolls off the shelf and threw them at the printer and printed the pre-sliced keychain. And I was like, yeah, it's probably not going to be fantastic because this filament's a little old, and this is sliced for Prusa, whatever. But it was like the worst first print I've ever seen. So, is that partially user error? Sure. It's sliced for Prusa, the filament's not that dry, whatever. But I'm a pretty experienced user, and if I make that mistake, or that's how I do things, and it looks that bad, it's like, to me, there's a bit of a disconnect. Like I didn't expect 100%, but I didn't expect 50 either. So
I want to comment on this because this is so in line with one of my experiences I had this week. I destroyed a printer, a very expensive printer. And I got really down on myself because I was like, this is like the 3rd or 4th or maybe 5th machine that I've destroyed. And I was like, I've never claimed to be an engineer. I'm not an engineer. I'm a hobbyist just like everyone else. And I'm like ADD and I don't read instructions super well. And like, I'm not a perfect human being or perfect hobbyist. I'm probably not the smartest person either. But I was telling my wife like this, it's embarrassing and credibility. And my mom was in the room because she's visiting from out of town. And she's like, aren't you getting these machines before anyone? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, and are the instructions always perfect? I'm like, no, sometimes they say right when it means left. And even the Bamboo Lab printer, the first one I unboxed they fixed it before, but like things were actually literally mislabeled on the product. Stickers, not in the injection molds. But Surfalex, you said expendable. And I was like, I'm destroying a lot of these products, and some of it is definite user error, or just that I'm so rushed where, I probably shouldn't run it like this, but I really need this print to work for this video, so I'm just going to do it anyway because the video is more important to me than the printer. But at the same time, there is an element of like, you're one of the first people. You can't just Google for the XL and find other people who've modified their profiles. Like, you're one of the first people to use the 5 tool head outside of Prusa. I'm one of the first 5 people in the world to use this printer that I destroyed. I couldn't exactly go on and be like, hey, how concerned do I need to be about this thing doing? I don't want to share exactly what happened, but so there's also an element of that. Like, you're doing this without support. Someone, I had an issue where customs opened one of the boxes on my printer a long time ago. It was an old review. And I think they just didn't put the manual back in because I couldn't find it. And some comment warrior was like, how dumb are you? Just go online and Google and look for the manual. I'm like, yeah, I tried that. This printer is under embargo. It's not even in the slicer. Like, I have to get custom profiles to install it. Like, I can't just go into the Discord for Anycubic and be like, hey guys, there's going to be a new printer coming out. Can someone tell me what the exact voltage is that I need to So there's also an element of that. That was just me redeeming myself. I'm sorry that you guys had to listen to that, but there is that, right? Like, you're the first.
Yeah.
You can't be expected, even with all your experience. Like, this is a product that doesn't have millions and millions of user hours on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to touch on 2 things you said. The first, and I'm sure you're highly aware of this, you can edit a blog post. It's very difficult to edit a video.
100%.
And and you can post a video, and then like the next day you're like, oh, my opinion changed, like, or it fixed itself, or it broke, or whatever. And it's
right.
Like, unless you take the time to do a whole nother update video, it's like you just leave people in the lurch, and you leave them assuming that whatever you previously said is true. So that's why I felt it was
law, like, the printer never exhibits any problems until you hit publish. Right?
Yeah.
Like, my GDX Max 3, almost perfect. I mentioned that I upgraded the firmware and fried the eMMC, which is unforgivable on their part, but printer printed perfectly. The day I hit publish, nozzle clogs every single day, nonstop. It's like Murphy's Law, and I put a lot of hours on that printer before.
Yeah.
So there's
It's interesting because some reviewers have the opposite experience, right? Like, like Uncle Jesse is the one guy that comes to mind. He's always like, it doesn't work.
It never works for him, and then after he hits publish, all of a sudden he gets a replacement part or whatever. Everything's perfect. So yeah, it's totally true.
Yeah. So that's why for me, like, doing kind of a content arc or a story arc and doing multiple videos and not just like moving on. And I think, you did a community post yesterday, which I thought was really insightful. Asking your viewers, like, should you spend more time, or should you, do a video and then move on?
Right.
And yeah, I mean, kudos to you for opening up in that regard.
Thank you.
There's a lot of people in the shadows that just read things, consume content, and don't engage. And I used to be one of those people before I was a content creator. I never commented on anything on YouTube.
And now you know how valuable those comments are. Yeah,
exactly. So, here I am reading all of those comments, that feedback from users that you got, and I'm benefiting from it, right? Because I don't need to ask my own audience. I'm like, hey, I can put myself in Jonathan's shoes, and I can see what his audience has to say, and I can learn from it. So kudos to the commenters, and I just figured out I could expand the chat on the side of this window to see what people are actually saying. I've had that hidden the entire time.
Oh wow.
So thank you everybody for tuning in and commenting, because I wasn't a commenter. I was not an engaged viewer. I was just like a fly on the wall for a long time.
It makes such a difference. And also, I've actually been wanting to say something like this, but I don't want to put out like a seemingly emo post, but like, especially thank you to the commenters who keep it positive. Like, there are people who are like, oh, you got this wrong, da, da, da. Or there are people who are like, hey, I've really enjoyed some of your videos, but like, just that, keeping it kind, and you don't have to flatter, right? But being like, hey, I don't mean to be mean about this, but you really need to fix da 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 da. Like, just that adding, because the amount of hateful shit that people put in a YouTube comments box blows my mind. Like, and just the like depravity. I don't get that much of it. I don't want people to think, but like, it's 1 out of 100 comments that are just freaking mean. Like, something happened to this person and they're taking it out on you, kind of thing. Anyway, so the people who, I didn't say that to complain. I said that just to the people who take the time to just write, hey, great video, or hey, I learned something, or hey, this really helped me. I've been struggling with this. makes such a difference to counterbalance all the mean shit. So thank you to the commenters, as you said, you know,
Absolutely.
because it does take 100 of those positive comments to make you feel better after the one really shitty one, right?
Absolutely. And yeah, it doesn't even need to be a comment on like the video or the production quality or anything like that. Some people just focus on what you said and like the product itself, or it's kind of tangential. But that engagement is what keeps me coming back. It's like, you know, if
Right.
nobody comments, nobody engages, I'm you know, less likely to continue doing it. And that is what keeps me motivated, right? Is like the people that are engaging, people are showing interest, and that shows you that you're doing something valuable, because otherwise you're in an
Totally.
echo chamber.
And
So,
I play on this, now that we've gotten into just content creation, I play on this border between, you know, content creators will tell you like, hey man, just put your head down, don't focus on the comments, you know, do your best work and just stay focused on what you're creating. But at the same time, on a human level, right, even if you have the perfect self-esteem, which I don't, on a human level, we do this because it creates value. If no one watched your videos, like someone said on Colin and Samir, it's like, would you still enjoy doing this if you made the whole video and then just didn't hit publish? Instead of hitting publish, you hit delete. And the answer is absolutely none. And that doesn't mean that you're doing it for validation, but it means, as you said, with designing 3D printed parts of your own and selling them, it's super important to us as humans to find meaning in the fact that our work helps someone and or gives them value. It doesn't have to help. You can entertain someone, you can lift their day, you can teach them something. But it's like, I think we only create this content. I mean, you have a successful business. You don't need this extra stress. I came from other businesses. I don't need this extra stress. Like, I barely worked in my last business. We do this because it feels really good to contribute to this community and to create for people and to learn and be able to share what you're learning. You know, so like, it's important to get that feedback that you're doing exactly that. It's important to feel like you're adding value to the conversation. It's important to know that you're getting more people into this hobby and they're getting joy out of it the way that you do. So that's my emotional appeal.
absolutely. Yeah. And just last comment on that point, it's definitely a mutually beneficial relationship. Like the amount I learn from other people
Totally.
by doing this is like incredible, right? Like I learn a lot based on feedback, and you know, this is an opportunity for me to kind of, you know, I study a lot, and this is the analogy. You study a lot, but if you don't take the test, you don't know what you know.
True.
You have so many preconceived notions, so many assumptions about, oh, you know, I'm right about this, I'm wrong about that, whatever. But until you actually like focus, like take a concerted effort, for instance, like your video on air quality, like, you know, until you sit down and like study a topic, you don't know what you don't know.
Totally.
And
And
now
that
you do.
video, I felt at the beginning, I felt like it was such a failure. I'll be honest with you. Like, it's like, okay, everything I thought was wrong. All the testing I did literally only revealed how little I knew and still how little I know. And then going into the comments, which everyone was super friendly and super nice, and I really appreciate my community, both on Discord and on YouTube, where people were uploading like, hey man, you really got to look into this too, and you need to be thinking about one guy who had been in charge of air quality in industrial manufacturing was like, yeah, you got to be thinking there's a difference in height. You want to get what did he say? Clean air in, junk out, clean air in the bottom, junk out the top. Like it actually matters. You want to move the junk up away from where the humans are breathing it and get it out the window because VOCs go up. So there's like so much to learn. I felt like such a failure. Like this is the least scientific video. Basically, the bottom line was like, we all need to be thinking way more about air quality and open up the windows and be doing more about this. And people seem to have loved the video. So that was cool. That was really, really cool. And I want to do a follow-up and be more scientific about it. So
Absolutely. Yeah, just looping back for a minute. You talked
Sure.
about the XL and you talked about a printer in customs getting damaged or something. I saw somebody shared a photo of their XL that was like absolutely destroyed, and it had like that like classic tape on it that said like open for customs inspection.
Right.
And like I feel so bad for this guy. Like they must have
2
taken out everything.
years.
they must have taken every piece of packaging out and,
Right.
it was shared on like the Prusa XL user group, or maybe Jonathan could put a link to it because it's on Twitter. Literally decimated, like every printed part broken. And like the insult to injury is that the gummy bears were everywhere. So it's like, they must have opened it and like shook it out. And it was just the saddest sight. This like Prusa XL completely decimated, gummy bears in every like crevice of the printer. And it was like,
2 years.
I mean,
but the insurance will pay that, but still 2 freaking years to wait.
I hope so. But yeah.
Well, Taylor, I feel like we could talk for hours, and we should, but on another episode. I really enjoyed getting to know you, and I don't think this is the last time we'll chat. I want to give you an opportunity to let everyone know. I'll put links in the description, but for people listening on the audio especially, where can people check out your products? Where can people follow your channel? All that good stuff. And how can we support you also as someone who does for the community?
For sure. So, and just to kind of open this up a little bit, I don't expect anybody in this audience to want to buy my products. And part of why I wanted to start content creation is because I was catering to a market of people that didn't care about 3D printing.
Yeah.
Right. They just cared about getting a good product. But I know so much about 3D printing. So now I'm able to kind of, again, double end it and take what I've learned, and I learn every day producing products and selling them. And I'm able to use that and give that back to the community of people that wouldn't be my customer otherwise. And this is a relationship where it's not transactional. You don't pay me to watch my content unless, you support me on Patreon. But I'm able to provide value. You provide value to me in return. And it's kind of totally separate from my business, besides the co-branding, which, I don't know if that was the right move or not. I think it's helped bolster my credibility in the early days. Manufacturers see my website, they send me an email, whatever. But yeah, I've often thought whether I should have branded the channel differently than my business or not. But
you can rebrand it. Tom did after 450,000 subscribers. You can rebrand.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, made with layers. So I've thought of that, and maybe I'll consider doing that. But for now, I think, I have all these t-shirts that say YGK3D. So that helps. I'm able to wear those in my videos. But just thank you so much to everybody for watching, for commenting. Totally. Like I said, I didn't really see your comments until like the very end here. So there's probably questions that I've missed, and I don't know if I can respond to those after the fact.
Bubbling up the relevant ones, so I think you're fine. But you can go after the fact, and you can see them in there.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know if I can reply to them directly, but if I can, I will. If I can't, just email me. My email is on my website, yg3d.com. I'm a pretty open guy. If you have any questions that I didn't answer, I'd be happy to answer them. If you do want to support me, go subscribe. That's kind of the only metric I have for people enjoying my content is subscriptions. So, and it's free, and I'd like to see you over there. So yeah, thank you for having me on. This was awesome.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for a great conversation. I'll take us out, and then we can debrief after.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Infill Podcast. For show notes or links to anything mentioned in today's episode, visit thenextlayer.com. If you enjoyed the episode, please don't forget to leave us a review wherever you're listening, or click the like button to let us know, and consider subscribing to The Next Layer on YouTube so you can tune in live and participate in the next conversation. We'll see you on The Next Layer.